Does poetry interest you? There's this one poem which has been on my mind lately. I acquainted myself with it after hearing a BBC Hard Talk episode where this guy, Sir John Tavener, he was being interviewed by one of my favorite BBC newscasters. Her name is Sarah Montague. And she was interviewing this guy, and he made reference to this poem called The Divine Comedy a few times in that interview. Obviously a very wise man. And he's the guy who was famous for composing the music called Song for Athene, I believe, and was played while they were raising Lady Diana Spencer's casket. Anyway, a couple of things that he said stay in my mind. One is, he said, life is a creeping tragedy, and that's why it's imperative that we remain cheerful. And the other thing he said was that I compose music for God. Basically, I think what he meant by that was that he was saying, you know, like all poets, I guess, or all good artists or sculptures or sculptors, I think the art itself is created by the divinity of it all. Anyway, this poem called The Divine Comedy has been, I'm reacquainting myself with it after 3 or 4 years. And I wanted to catalog my thoughts on what's going on in my mind. I feel a change coming on, like Bob Dylan once said. And I used to be an advocate for no religion, it's the root cause of all evil. I used to think that way, but now I feel like I have a deeper understanding into the role that religion and faith, no matter which faith, has played in communities, in society, and in our world, the purpose that it serves for to humanity in general. The Divine Comedy, of course, I will let you research on your own. And the reason I would like more and more of my friend circle, of my inner circle of friends to know about this poem is because of the richness of this text. And as I get older, as my friends get older, as we get older, I would like to be able to discuss people's understandings, perspectives of this poem, and the richness of its concepts. And that's why I'm cataloging my thoughts today. The poem itself, just to briefly introduce it, is that it's Dante Alighieri, who is the poet as well as the pilgrim, or he plays the role of the protagonist in the poem. And he is, although he's written it, he's also discovering himself through this story. And it's basically the plot. The plot is about Dante. The opening scene is him being lost in a dark wood. So you can imagine this. Imagine yourself you think you're dreaming, and you wake up in this dark wood. I think a good visual would be if many of you have seen Avatar, the movie, and where the hero of the movie, the guy, I forget his name, but the Marine who gets lost in this new world, and there's all sorts of beings and different things that he doesn't recognize. He's lost in this place. Imagine yourself lost like that in a dark wood in the night. So that's how the poem starts, and Dante is lost, and of course he is going through into the afterlife. He wrote this poem in the early 14th century. This poem is set in the early 14th century, so there's him, and he from a life perspective, or from a life standpoint, he went from the top of fortune's wheel. He used to be the friar of the city of Florence, I believe, and he, due to the factionalism between the Guelphs and the Ghibellines, and Dante, I believe, was a Ghibelline, and there was a power struggle, and his party, the Ghibellines, lost, and the Guelphs had taken over. I don't know if I have that mixed up, but it's not so important. But anyway, he fell. His party fell out of power, and there was a change of power. And he, being the friar, was exiled. He was sent away. So you can imagine he was on the top of fortune's wheel, and then he fell from there, fell from his position, lost his friends, family, society, his place in the community. And so he was exiled, never to come back to his home city, Florence. And he wrote this poem as he, I believe, moved through monasteries and lived in different monasteries. And you know what they do in monasteries. People communally, they pray, and they sing hymns, and 6-7 times a day, group singing, and in the night sometimes. And obviously this activity, I think, transcends you to another level of mental level, I want to say. And so here we are. He writes this poem, and he's going through the afterlife. He has another guy, an older poet named Virgil, who is his guide, who comes to meet. I guess he meets him in the dark wood and takes him through the 3 stages of the afterlife. There's the Inferno, which you go into, I guess, right after you die. Then there's the Purgatory, which is like a stepping stone to Paradiso, which is the third stage of the afterlife. So Inferno is where a lot of us, I guess, lots of us get stuck, readers of this poem, because the Inferno is a place where the sins that you commit are replayed, so to speak. And again, the sins itself are categorized in 3 main categories, and there are subcategories to that. The main categories are the sin of incontinence. Sin of incontinence is you have no control over yourself, whether it's eating, which I think I'm a sinner of. Incontinence, sins of can be you have no control over love, so you have affairs, I guess, or relationships outside of your marital bond, or many examples of the sins of incontinence. The second category is the sin of violence. And the sin of violence, of course, has to do with any kind of sin, from murder to pedophilia to you name it, anything to do with violence, killing people, things like that. Even Hitler, I guess, would be in this second category, the sin of violence. Perhaps no, maybe Hitler would be in the third. The deepest, darkest place in hell is the third category, and that is the sin of fraud. Can you believe this? Fraud is a worse sin. That means cheating is a worse sin than violence, if you can believe it. This is how Dante has portrayed it in this poem. It's incredible. What resonates with me, I think, about this is that fraud is a bigger sin because you're sinning against your people who you trust, the people who, your family, your community, your, the trust that has been given to you or bestowed on you initially, and you break it. Now here, what comes to mind for me is today's world. Today's world, most of these, the models that have been set up and the people who are the architects of these models belong in the third circle. Let me give you a few examples. Let's take lending practices, for example. The predatory lending practices by the banks or these money lenders or these payday loan people. Don't get me wrong, I think I lived my life like this because of the availability of borrowed money, and I afford this life because I was able to borrow money. So, but again, there's the clean side and the dirty side. So I'm referring to the dirty side. The dirty side is where profit is king. It doesn't matter if the banks know that that people cannot pay back their loans or whatever. That's one example. The second example would be the deregulation of the food industry. Again, it's a sin to your community members, to mankind in general, because here, I believe, as I know, I have seen an interview on 60 Minutes where there are these biochemists who come and they're speaking with so much of, I want to say, pride or misplaced pride about their ability to be able to flavor our foods today. Just to use an example of the deregulation and what it does, where they are able to flavor the food, which screws around with your neurons in your head and makes you feel more hungry, and then you overeat. Think about it though. When I actually talk about this, the general response that I get from community and friends is, well, it's people's fault. They should know what they're eating. No, if you have your food which is flavored to make you eat more, just like this biochemist said when the interviewer asked him, well, I guess the people don't have really any choice. And he said no, and he said it with a smile. They have nowhere to go. They just eat. Imagine obesity and the epidemic that is created in the strain on the health system and the profit of big pharma. Think about that, right? Just imagine if we replaced all the hospitals, the huge hospitals, and provided free health clubs, state-of-the-art exercise machines, and provided those as free membership to all the citizens of your little state. I think people do want to go and live healthy lives and have access to work out, be healthy, and if they did, they would, I think, over a period of time, maybe 50, 60 years, we would see that we wouldn't need that many hospitals, and we would probably need more of these health club facilities. So the visual that I get in my mind is to think of a huge hospital and think, just imagine that was full of exercise machines, equipment, state of the art, drawing people in to come and live a healthy life and have them in close locations. But of course, there would be a reduction of resources for the pharmaceutical industry because the funding comes from more medicine. Again, I don't want this to be mistaken as I don't want research and development in curing diseases. Absolutely not. I do want that. And I do want all of us in my utopic world, I do want that there's money and funding given to research and development without humans being used as guinea pigs to generate the money that is required. And so that's one more example. There are many more that you can think of, that I can think of, you can think of. And so so there's this one part of the poem that there's many parts of this poem which will find resonance with you to life in general. But the reason I think I want to catalog my thoughts is because I'm changing. In the past, people, because religion was so dominant force in the social fabric, I think folks generally had a clear definition of the line between good and evil, and people felt guilty if they were participating in evil in any way because of religion and religious texts. And today it seems like because of the unraveling of religion or that underlying or overarching sensibility, people are lost. They've gone astray, and they don't know that the architects, even they're children of these architects who have the power to change things, don't know whether they are doing wrong, don't know that predatory practices against the human race, where profit is king, has a line that cannot be crossed. They don't know where that line is, and they just willfully cross it into decadence. And if that is the path that the future is leading to, we can imagine slavery and anarchy and violence as a normal manifestation of our future, which is quite sad. But the story that or this little piece that I want to speak about from Dante's Divine Comedy is this betrayal of. Also, this story is set in Pisa, and there is two characters, Ugolino and Ruggieri. Ugolino is a Guelph, and Pisa is ruled, or the ruling party in Pisa is the Ghibellines, and Ruggieri, the Archbishop of Pisa, is he's facing issues with the Guelphs and their rogue activities, where they're stealing castles or occupying castles at the edges of the city. The Guelphs are doing it. So Ruggieri comes up with this plan and says, let's hire a CEO, let's hire a Guelph CEO, And that way, he can control all the illegal activities done by the Guelphs. So they hire Ugolino as the podesta, I believe, or the CEO. The podesta, I believe, is the Italian word. They hire Ugolino, and he takes up his position. Now he's more powerful than Ruggieri, because Ruggieri is the archbishop. Now this guy has been hired, and what happens right away is that there's betrayal, the start of betrayal, because Ugolino comes into that position and starts helping the Guelphs, his faction, to say, yeah, go ahead and take the castle. I'm not going to report you guys. And Ruggieri, right away, he knows that this was a mistake, and he wants to, so that again, he starts undermining the authority of Ugolino. And obviously, when you hire a leader and then you start undermining their authority, shit happens. There's things that start going wrong. Finally, they arrest Ugolino and they put him in a tower prison. Now, this is the interesting start of the story. So they arrest Ugolino and they strip him naked, put him into this, birdhouse tower prison. Not only do they put him in, but they arrest him with all his male heirs. So, in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, I remember seeing this sculpture of Ugolino, and he's got his head down in anguish. It's a marble sculpture, just exquisite. And his kids, grandchildren, all of them naked. And he's in deep thought, and they are just reaching out to him. So Ugolino has been put into this tower prison, and they have been fed once a day, I believe, through a small little portal or hole, and they're spending their days like this. And one day, Ugolino hears from the place that the food comes in, he hears nails being driven in. So they're being, he understands right away that they are going to be slowly starved to death. So he looks at his blood, his veins in his hands, already very, very frail. And he turns to stone. That's what he says. He's petrified. He turns to stone. He doesn't cry. He just turns to stone. He's not able to offer, how elders should, in times of distress, offer comfort to their children. In this case, Ugolino is not able to. He understands what's going on, and the look in his face, and he turns to stone, obviously, metaphorically, stone-hearted or cold. And his kids, especially the youngest of them all, doesn't know what's going on, and he asks, there's this line, which is, it's just blows your mind. The littlest of the kids, he says, what is it, Father? Why do you look that way? Why do you look that way? Of course, no answer. Days pass. He sees them, all his kids, over a period of time. The kids actually, there's one part where the kids are actually offering themselves to their father, saying, eat us, Dad, nourish yourself, stay alive a little longer. And of course, slowly the the children die, and he, Ugolino, turns blind because of the lack of nourishment. He turns blind, and he starts calling out their names and feeling them around their dead bodies. And that's the scene on Earth, the real life, right? Now, we'll connect the poem. Dante is walking as a pilgrim through the afterlife, and he's in the 9th circle of hell, I believe. The 9th circle or the 7th circle. I think it's the 9th circle of hell. And Ugolino is there. He is his meal. So this is the scene. Ruggieri, first of all, hell, the 9th circle of hell, you'd think is hot and fiery and boiling and everything else, but it's not. It's actually cold, colder than you can ever imagine. So everything is iced up. There is ice, a lake of ice. Ruggieri is encased in ice, in this ice lake, but his head is visible from here. Skull is visible, hair, a little bit of hair. And as Dante is passing by, Ugolino stops him, wants to tell him the story of what's going on. And so he is actually eating from his meal is the head of Ruggieri. He's munching on the head, the brain. There's hair coming, Ruggieri's hair coming out of Ugolino, blood, everything. The metaphor is a canine metaphor. It's an animal metaphor, where this guy is eating from the head of Ruggieri. Ruggieri, of course, cannot speak to Dante because he's encased in ice. And Ugolino is actually telling Dante the story of this betrayal, and he leaves out the part that he as well was involved in betrayal. And he says to Dante that, what this guy did to me, and I'm going to, and this is the only thing that feeds my hunger, is that I can eat this guy's head, munch on his head, kind of thing. So what Dante is telling us through this whole thing is that if you have sinned against community, if you have focused on gain for yourself without any consideration for the effects that it can have, well, actually, you will get what you want in the end, perhaps, because there's another story of Francesca and Paolo, which is similar, where you'll get what you want in hell without nothing stopping you, but also innocent people, like your kids, your community members, they are people who are also affected by this sin. So yeah, it's an incredible poem. Of course, it's called The Divine Comedy. It's written in Italian and been translated to English. Very complicated. You probably need to research it with videos and things like that before you actually read it in its original text translation. It's called a Commedia, and it's very famous. It's enriching. It's an incredible poem that it's been on my mind, and I said, let me make a quick video, but I see that it's almost coming in on 30 minutes. It's too long. I don't know if I can upload it to YouTube. One of the reasons I do want to put this on YouTube is someday my kids will watch this, and they will be enriched by the real poem itself. But so why not use YouTube?